Hi, I'm Daniel Romero. I'm the VP of Growth and Marketing at Love and Science, and today I am going to test my sports knowledge or intuition, I guess, against ChatGPT's. So I'm going to fill out a March Madness bracket, and I'm going to have ChatGPT do the same thing. Then we're going to see who's further from reality when it's all said and done. So I'm going to use this ESPN tournament challenge bracket. I am a big sports fan. I'm a big basketball fan, but I don't pay any attention to college sports whatsoever. So I don't have a clue. I haven't seen a single college game this year. No idea who's doing what, who's on what team. So I'm just going to go through based on my gut instinct here and see where we get to. So first off, in the East, I'm going to select UConn over Stetson because I didn't know Stetson was even a school. I remember my dad had a bottle of Stetson cologne that he never used, and I would smell it from time to time as a small kid. That's as much as I know about Stetson. FAU versus Northwestern. I don't know what FAU is, so I'm going to pick Northwestern. San Diego State versus UAB. I'm going to go San Diego State because my family is from San Diego. I feel a weird kinship to it even though I've never lived there. Auburn versus Yale. I'm just going to assume that Yale's not going to do anything this year. BYU versus Duquesne. I'm going to call an upset here. I'm going to go with Duquesne. Illinois versus Morehead State. I'm going to go Illinois. Washington State versus Drake. I'm going to say Washington State. Iowa State versus South Dakota State. I'm going to go with another upset. I'm going to go South Dakota State. On the south side, so Houston versus Longwood, I'm going to go Houston. Nebraska versus Texas A&M, I'm going to say Texas A&M. Wisconsin versus James Madison, I'm going to say, I'm going to pick Wisconsin. My daughter's favorite president is James Madison. I don't know why. She's obsessed with him for some reason. So I'm going to switch it. I'm going to go back to James Madison in honor of my daughter. Duke versus Vermont. I'm going to pick Duke because that's one of the only college teams that I've ever watched in my life. Texas Tech versus NC State. I'm going to say Texas Tech. Kentucky Oakland. I'm going to go Kentucky. Florida versus, I don't know what this is, BOIS/COL. I'm going to say Boise because I don't know what that is. So it doesn't look like they even have a logo. It's just a grayed out basketball. Marquette versus Western Kentucky. I'm going to say Marquette. One with the highest seed basically across the board, I think. Now let's look at the West. North Carolina, I'm going to pick them. It says they're playing as HOW/WAG, Howwag. I have no idea what that could possibly be. Mississippi State versus Michigan State. I'm going to pick Michigan State. My mom is from Michigan, and I feel kind of like the San Diego thing from my dad's side. I feel a weird kinship to it on some level. I don't know why. Grand Canyon University versus St. Mary's. I thought Grand Canyon was only an online school, so I'm going to go ahead and pick them just because I'm familiar with them as a college. Someone who does a lot of higher education marketing. They're a big player in the space, so I'm going to give them an edge there. Alabama versus Charleston. I'm going to go Alabama. Clemson versus New Mexico. I'm going to pick New Mexico in honor of my wife. That's her favorite state. She was a teacher on the Navajo reservation for a while. She loves it out there, so I'm going to go with that just for her sake. Baylor versus Colgate. This sounds like a battle between toothpastes. I'm going to go with Baylor. Dayton versus Nevada. I'm going to say Dayton. Arizona versus Long Beach State, Arizona. Midwest. This is so long. My goodness. Purdue versus MTST/Graham. Again, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to go Purdue. Utah State versus TCU. I'm going to go TCU. Gonzaga versus McNeese, Gonzaga. Kansas versus Samford. Boy, that Samford logo looks pretty good. It looks like my bulldog named Nacho, but I'm going to say Kansas. South Carolina versus Oregon. I'm going to pick Oregon for Micah Jones. He's our VP. Actually, I don't know what his actual title is. he does a lot of brand and design, but he's out in Oregon, so nod to him. Creighton versus Akron. I'm going to say Creighton. Texas versus UVA CSU. I'm going to go Texas. Tennessee versus St. Peter's. I feel like I should say Tennessee, especially because it's number 2 versus number 15. But I really hate seeing the Vols orange. Nothing against them, but it's just like it's all over. I'm in Nashville and it's just everywhere all the time. So I'm going to say St. Peter's. Plus, St. Peter, he was one of my favorite apostles, if not my favorite. So let's give him the edge. Okay, looking at the second round back to the East, I'm going to pick UConn over Northwestern. Auburn, no, I'm going to stick with San Diego State. San Diego State over Auburn. Illinois over Duquesne. And Washington State over South Dakota State. South, let's go Texas A&M over Houston. Nice big upset. Duke over James Madison. Kentucky over Texas Tech. And I'm going to say Florida beats Marquette. Back to the West, round 2. North Carolina beats Michigan. Alabama beats Grand Canyon. I'm going to stick with New Mexico, even though Baylor's probably going to beat them. And I'm going to go Arizona over Dayton because I like the state of Arizona personally. Midwest round 2. Let's go Purdue over TCU. I'm going to stick with Gonzaga over Kansas because I've always liked the name Gonzaga. I'm going to say Oregon over Creighton and Texas over St. Peter's. Home stretch, Sweet 16. So let's go UConn over San Diego State and Illinois over Washington State. On the south side, we're going to go Duke over Texas A&M. Somehow I got completely lost doing this. It's like I think things are filled out that I didn't select. Okay, let's jump back down. So I picked Illinois versus Washington State, UConn versus San Diego. I took UConn, took Illinois. So then UConn versus Illinois, I'm just going to say right now, Illinois. I'm going to go with the underdog. Okay, so Texas A&M versus Duke. I picked Duke. Kentucky versus Florida. I prefer the state of Florida over the state of Kentucky, so I'm going to pick Florida. And then Duke versus Florida. I'm going to give Florida the edge. I don't know why. Makes no sense. All right, back down to the West. So we've got North Carolina versus Alabama. I'm picking North Carolina. New Mexico versus Arizona. That's a tough call because I like Arizona. My wife likes New Mexico state-wise. I'm going to say Arizona because my preferences should win out, I think, over hers. Midwest, do Purdue versus Gonzaga. I'm going to say Gonzaga because one time when I was like probably maybe 12, my family took a big trip and we went through Indiana and we got stuck just circling around Purdue's campus for like, it felt like an eternity and we couldn't get away from it for some reason. I wasn't old enough to drive, so I don't know what was causing the problem, but somehow we couldn't escape it. So I have a bad taste in my mouth about Purdue. Oregon versus Texas. I'm going to pick Texas. And now we've got, where are we at? Okay, so now I've got to go back to the West. North Carolina versus Arizona. I'm going to pick Arizona. And Gonzaga versus Texas. I'm going to stick with Gonzaga. Let's see where we're at now. I've got to scroll back up. Okay, Final Four. So we've got Illinois versus Arizona. I'm going Arizona. Florida versus Gonzaga. I'm going Gonzaga. And then I'm going to pick Arizona over Gonzaga. How many total points will be scored in the championship game? I'm going to say 154. That's what I'm going to stick with here. Okay, so now that I've filled out my bracket, let's look at ChatGPT and see what they're going to do. So first off, I had a very difficult time getting them to answer in the first place. Like everything I asked, and the ChatGPT is saying, "Oh, I can't do that," pretending like it has no ability. And then if I ask it the right way, as always, somehow it comes up with some kind of an answer. Looking at their results, it's pretty boring. There's a couple upsets here and there, but they pretty much went straight down the line. So let's see. First seed predictions. East region, they said they're taking UConn over Stetson. FAU versus Northwestern, they say it's a very close game, but the 9 seed edges out a win. So they're taking Northwestern. 5th versus 12, they say 12 seed pulls off an upset. So UAB beats San Diego State. Auburn beats Yale. Big surprise. 6 versus 11, BYU versus Duquesne, they picked BYU. And Illinois versus Morehead State, they picked Illinois. So Washington State versus Drake, they're saying Drake is going to upset. And Iowa State versus South Dakota, Iowa will win comfortably as expected. Midwest region, let's see where that is. I had to make my browser small so I could see both ChatGPT's answers and my bracket. Okay, so they're saying Oregon State is going to beat South Carolina, and all the other stuff is going to be basically the same. So let's go back. We're going to take 1 versus 16. So Purdue is going to win. TCU is going to beat Utah State. McNeese is going to pull off an upset against Gonzaga. Kansas beats Samford. South Carolina loses to Oregon. That's their big upset. Creighton beats Akron. UVA/CSU beats Texas. And then finally, Tennessee beats St. Peter's. Okay, South region. I scroll all over creation because I made my window so small. So they're saying it's going to be the same pattern, but 5 versus 12 upset might not happen here. Okay, so we're going to go with Houston beats Longwood, and Texas A&M beats Nebraska. So they're going to say Wisconsin beats James Madison, Duke beats Vermont, Texas State beats NC State, Kentucky beats Oakland, BOIS/COL beats Florida. It's a surpriser. Marquette beats Western Kentucky. Oh my goodness, this is killing me. Okay, so where are we now? West region. So now we're in the West region. Similar pattern with potential for the 8 versus 9 game to swing in favor of the 8 seed. So that means Mississippi State will beat Michigan State according to ChatGPT. Okay, so everything else are going to go the same, basically. So North Carolina wins versus Howag, whatever that is. They're going to say Grand Canyon beats St. Mary's. I think I picked that same deal. Let's see here. 4 versus 13. 4 seed advances. So Alabama beats Charleston. Clemson beats New Mexico. Baylor beats Colgate. Nevada beats Dayton. And Arizona State wins. Okay, so let's see what the next round is. So East region, they're saying number 1 seed, so UConn beats Northwestern. Auburn beats UAB. BYU versus Illinois. Illinois wins. And Drake versus Iowa State. Iowa State wins. Midwest, they say 1 beats 9, so Purdue beats TCU. Kansas beats McNeese. Creighton beats Oregon. Tennessee beats UVA/CSU. South region. Let me scroll back and find South region. So Houston wins over Texas A&M. Duke beats Wisconsin. Kentucky beats Texas. And Marquette beats BOIS/COL. Finally, let's go find the West. North Carolina beats Mississippi State. Alabama wins, Baylor wins, and finally Arizona wins. Oh my goodness, we're almost done with this thing. So now moving into the Sweet 16. Oh, UConn beats Auburn. Iowa State beats Illinois. North Carolina beats Alabama. And oh, wait a second. Oh shoot, did I do this in the wrong order? Oh, I did it in the wrong order. UConn beats Auburn, and Iowa State beats Iowa State beats Illinois. West, we need to move down to the West. So they say number 1, so North Carolina does beat Alabama, and Baylor upsets Arizona. Now let's look at the South. Houston beats Duke, and Marquette beats Kentucky. Finally, the Midwest. Purdue beats Kansas, and Tennessee beats Creighton. On to the Elite Eight. This is taking so freaking long. On the Eastern side, we've got UConn beating Iowa State. West is North Carolina beats Baylor. South is Houston beats Marquette. Midwest is Purdue beats Tennessee. Moving into the Final Four hypothetical matchups. That's what ChatGPT calls it. East region versus Midwest. East region versus one region versus what? Okay, so they're just like, they totally just lied on this one. I'm gonna just ask them directly. Who wins between UConn and North Carolina? It's thinking about it, it's trying to figure it out. It's not answering. UConn advances to the national championship game. Now I'm going to ask him Houston versus Purdue. Based on the information available, oh come on, this is saying us challenging. Pick one. Houston, finally. So they're picking Houston in a hypothetical national championship game between UConn and Houston. Who wins and what's the final score? Let's see what they say. What it says, I keep saying they like it's a person. If I had to choose, I predict a narrow victory for UConn, reflecting their balance and depth. Closely contested game, perhaps something like UConn 78, Houston 74. Okay, finally. So we're talking, what's that, 152 points? Is that right? I'm gonna enter that in, and I'm going to submit this bracket, and we'll see who's better, ChatGPT or me. So it's gonna be a while. Sorry, I'll have to follow back up in a few weeks.